Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy so that you can go into all those barbecues and know that your crazy cousin who just listens to MSNBC has some comeuppance coming to them. Our first guest this week should not be a surprise to you because we mentioned it in last week's program when we were talking to Jim Bacon, and I asked him an energy question. He said, well, you really should ask Steve Hayner. I said, well, it's coincidental because Steve Hayner is going to be on this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Steve, welcome back to the program. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me back. I must not have offended enough people last time.
Oh, no, you missed the point. That's our business model. The more we offend...
Okay, well, good. You called the right person.
Of course, with the Thomas Jefferson Institute for Public Policy and, of course, contributor to Bacon's Rebellion online as well. The issues we were talking about, the Consumer Price Index had just come out,
right,
and energy costs broken out of it had gone up 40% year over year now. And we're not even close to winter yet, but I can hear all the air conditioners running right now.
Yes, they are. You can go to PJM's website, the interconnect between all the states, to see what kind of electricity is being drawn down, and renewables, not very much of it. It's about 5%. It's coal and natural gas, baby, keeping us cool.
I know just near our flagship station, the county has announced that they're looking into a 650-acre solar farm in an area where only 5% of the county property is available for housing development. I said, well, if you're going to do that, could you at least put all those solar cells on top of houses and build them for some of the low-income families around here? And they said that this 650-acre solar array should power 5,000 homes.
Well, yeah, but when it works, it only works 25% of the time.
Mm-hmm. What about the issue with this? And we can get into the subsidization of solar at another point, because it's really about paying a business with your taxpayer money so that they can claim that it's less expensive somehow under thing. But one of the problems I have with solar panels is that they only last about 30, maybe 35 years if you take good care of them, which I'm sure government will do. And then California insists that you put them in a hazardous material dump site. They are hazardous material. They contain all these heavy metals and all kinds of materials in those panels. You can extract them, but it costs so much to extract them, they won't do it. And so are you really being ecologically friendly if you use solar cells? Because, the air is clean, the groundwater is poisoned, worse than Flint, Michigan.
It's a trade-off, and I'm not sure the trade-off is all that advantageous. I agree. I think... it's just everybody needs to watch what's about to happen in Europe. I hope our news media doesn't really like to cover this stuff because it doesn't fit their agenda. But CNBC, which is a more balanced approach, they had a guy today on their show talking about all the industries in Germany are sitting there on pins and needles waiting to be told by the German government, you can have gas this winter, you can have gas this winter, but you cannot have natural gas this winter, and you cannot have natural gas this winter. Germany is talking about a 5% hit to its gross domestic product if Putin cuts off the natural gas. So if Germany goes into recession, if Europe goes into recession, the United States will go into recession. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm. Well, in considering how much we're relying on people keeping the U.S. dollar as our reserve currency,
right.
It's a frightening thing.
Yeah.
Well, when you see though that people are being held hostage with energy, the way Putin is to Europe, and it seemed interesting. Everyone was pointing to Russia and say, "Look, he saved their economy by tapping into their natural resources." And nobody stopped and said, "Hold it! What happens if he decides to cut everyone off?"
Well, at the time there were Germans, there were other Europeans saying we are making a mistake becoming this dependent on the oil and gas from Russia. But at the same time, their politics are dominated by the Green parties, just like our politics in Virginia have been dominated by the Green wing of the Democratic Party, and so they can't drill for, they won't drill for the gas. They won't do the fracking. They can't drill for more oil. these giant battles anytime they try to build a pipeline to move natural gas around their economies. So they were dependent. I mean, they knowingly made themselves dependent on Russia, and we are basically watching the first renewable energy war. If they were not so dependent on renewable energy, they would not have to tiptoe around Putin. He would not have been able to do what he did. He would not have been able to invade. He invaded because he knew he had them under his control.
That's an interesting point, because it may have been you that declared unilateral energy surrender when we closed down our pipelines and we shuttered a lot of the things that we were doing to create so much energy here just in North America, and a lot of it was
right.
Canada as well. That we were turning over a position where we could be that sharp, pointy elbow to keep the tyrants at bay, whether it's Saudi Arabia, where the president just was before, and their human rights issues, Russia and the way they're behaving. We've got people who have no concern for human rights, either building our solar cells in China or delivering the natural gas out of Germany.
Well, and don't forget they also have all the supplies for the car batteries too. So we're under their thumb for the car batteries as well.
That's true. I'd forgotten that.
That's a big one. I mean, they've got all those heavy metals, and it's you try to I think there was a copper mine up in Wisconsin or Minnesota or something that the Biden administration shut down. I mean, we need copper, and they shut down the copper mine.
Well, is there a balancing act? Because it seems like, and I know that a lot of folks in my industry refer to the green movement now as a cult, because even when you show them unequivocal evidence of what's going wrong, they just ignore it because the Kool-Aid says I'm going to be okay. Is there any middle ground anymore, or is it just give up and wait for some heat to come on?
Well, I mean, it's a shame because I do think I've never been one to say that there's no role at all for solar, no role at all for the wind projects. I think both have a great deal to offer, but they have to be balanced by reliable base load that comes from natural gas or from nuclear. And I'm not a huge fan of coal. I think coal has a lot of other problems besides just carbon dioxide. I think coal has just got all kinds of pollution problems. So. But we don't need coal because we've got all this natural gas. The problem is now they won't let us develop the natural gas. I think if you put the reasonable people in a room, they could probably work something out. But unfortunately, the reasonable people don't show up to the meeting. They're afraid to come. You've got a large number of people out there who believe we can run an economy purely on wind and solar and battery, and that is just insane.
Well, we saw what happened. Was it last summer in Germany where they were having rolling blackouts because they had shut down all their other plants and there just wasn't?
They closed 3 nuclear plants in December of 21, and they're planning to close 3 nuclear plants in December of 22. And these are perfectly viable nuclear plants with years of life left, and they produce huge amounts of electricity. But their anti-nuclear movement has taken over the politics, and they're still planning to shut them down. They're starting to see some movement, starting to see some reality glimmering in their politics. They've got some study underway, which maybe they will save those 3 plants for a while. Because, again, they're looking at a winter where people are going to die. Coal kills a lot more people than heat. They're ignoring that right now, but coal kills a lot more people than heat.
It's a scary scenario. Stephen Hainer is on with us. He's been a participant both from inside and outside the world of politics and public policy with the Thomas Jefferson Institute for Public Policy. On with us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Stephen, you mentioned nuclear quietly, except for some pockets where, say, I see the announcement from the Department of Energy that President Biden has sent millions of dollars to expand or to modernize both of our nuclear power plants here in Virginia. Is the current administration, for all of its foibles, at least aware that we need to, expand our nuclear capability?
I don't count Biden among the anti-nuclear crowd. I think the people around Biden understand the role it plays and are willing to support it, whether it needs financial support or basically just legal support. Mm-hmm. So I don't see them. And I hope they're putting money into the research for these small modular reactors, because I think that's the future.
Yeah.
These are smaller reactors with about 600 megawatts. They're almost portable. You can move them around on trucks, basically, pieces on trucks. You build them in a factory and then take them to the site. And very similar to the technology that you see in the ships, in the submarines, and the aircraft carriers. Those basically are small modular reactors. And so I think that's the future of nuclear. I think if you really want to go carbon free, that's the way to do it.
Let's go into that, because I don't think people hear about these modules. I know you and I have talked about them in the past. I've had a couple of other friends that are in the biz, and they talk about the possibilities of this. I find the decentralization possibilities of it, small electric utilities being able to compete with the Dominions. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend anyone holding an elected office. But you see what I mean. I mean, you can with the ability to do this, you could actually have a community, 4 or 5 counties, that could say, no, we're not on Dominion. We're going to do our own electricity, or even competitive to Dominion.
Again, I'm not sure whether a county government or a small, would want to be the ones coming up with the financing. Even these small modular reactors are not cheap. This is an expensive technology, but it's an expensive technology that will give you, all going well, a much longer lifespan than one of these wind turbines or solar panels. So I think, but I do think it will change. If they could get it going, it would change the industry quite a bit. And the perfect solution, just say you're Hawaii. You don't need that much of a power plant. Maybe a modular reactor setup would work for a place like Hawaii or an even smaller island. Mm-hmm. So I think the technology is still there. It's it's a shame that 20, 30 years ago everybody got frightened by a couple of incidents, most of which weren't that bad, but the media blew them out of proportion. Mm-hmm. And now you do have, there was some Channel 12 reporter, I will not mention her name. I was looking at her Facebook page, and she made some comment about the seismic issues out there at North Anna, and she's afraid it's going to blow up. You can't. I mean, nuclear power plants don't blow up. They just don't. Physics don't. They don't blow up. I mean, they might leak, but they don't blow up. And she's worried about it blowing up, for God's sake.
When the mineral earthquake took place, which really was very close to the North Anna plant, the front page of the Daily Progress was North Anna shuts down. And I looked at the paper. I said, yes, because that's what it's supposed to do.
That's right. That's exactly what the design called for, exactly what the operating plan called for, and it worked exactly as intended. And it was very safe. Yeah. And it worked. Again, it's there's no question they knew the fault line was there, and they designed for it, and it worked. Yep. And what happened in Fukushima in Japan had nothing to do with the earthquake. It was the tsunami. It was the wave that came in and caused most of the problems there. And not to say that they shouldn't have anticipated that, because probably should have. But still, it's just again, unfortunately, there's an awful lot of competition. I mean, the wind people are happy to pick on the nuclear people. The gas people pick on the nuclear people. The nuclear people pick, instead of somebody at the top, some adults getting together and working out a plan that actually works.
Well, and is commonly, and I was talking to a friend of mine some years ago about it, that the problem with nuclear energy is the first experience most of us had with it was a big mushroom cloud over a couple of Japanese cities. So
luckily I wasn't there, so that predates even me, but still, yes. But I lived in an Air Force base where we knew we were a target, so I understand.
When you look, though, at the technology, I mean, we do, as you mentioned, 3 Mile Island. I played baseball in the shadow of the stacks years ago, and I seem to be fine. But the issues in Fukushima and in Chernobyl are design issues that also have very little relevance to the way Americans design.
I mean, it's not like these accidents happened and nobody paid attention or learned anything. I mean, people did diagnose the issue, and the designs they're using now are very different than the designs from the 1970s and the 1960s, and far safer. There's no question about it. But that's also one reason why they're a little bit more expensive, but they're far safer. And again, the Navy has had an incredible safety record. with the reactors it runs. And
a lot of them.
I have been on nuclear ships. I have walked, I knew I was walking down the corridor and the nuclear reactor was on the other side of the bulkhead. Never occurred to me to worry about that.
No, now I want to take the next step in technology, and we famously hear about the French and the way they can get more out of a nuclear fuel rod than we try to. Is there still more we can learn into how they do that?
Yes, and well, we know how to do it. It's just, again, it's a matter of political will. We made the decision all the way back in the Carter years not to reprocess the fuel and reprocess it so we could again, more than 90% of the energy value remains at the end of the cycle. They can reprocess that fuel and use it again, and they know how. And one of the reasons they don't is, right now, there's a fairly high confidence they can get fresh uranium, but that's also something we look for overseas. So we ought to be developing our own sources, and if we don't want our own sources, we should be looking at the reprocessing, because we have all the energy we need. We have hundreds of years worth of energy in that unused reprocessed, in that unreprocessed fuel.
It is a fascinating thing, Steve. So you mentioned political will. So now we're going to get into your. I'm going to throw a slow pitch right into your strike zone here, and we're going to talk about Virginia, specifically the General Assembly and Dominion, and its position. We haven't been able to rein in. We've tried a little bit to rein in at least in trying to write code that would not specifically say this law is about Dominion, but we all knew it was about Dominion, and we weren't able to get it to Governor Youngkin's desk. Is there hope that we can get to a place where Dominion is not paying for the very people who are sitting on the boards regulating them?
That's a big if. I think there is hope. I would love to see some changes in the campaign finance laws. I would love to see some limits on some of the campaign donations to rein in some of that. It's not just Dominion. I mean, the wind people and the solar people write big checks too, and have had great success in getting the assembly to do what they want to do. So the whole process is somewhat driven by the donors. I don't mind saying this. I don't mind it being on the air. I mean, I was disappointed at the Youngkin administration's actions and inactions, mainly during the 22 General Assembly session. We had two bills coming out of the Republican House. One would have completely repealed the Virginia Clean Energy Act, Clean Economy Act from 2020, and the other would have amended it. And the one that would have amended it basically said, well, you can keep your targets and you can keep some of your goals, but let's let the State Corporation Commission decide what really makes sense financially. Let's decide these things based on the merits and the money, not basically because we just want to do it. We don't care what it costs, because VCEA just demands you do it no matter what the cost. And neither one of those bills got much help from the governor's office. And he has now endorsed the offshore wind project for Dominion Power. So, I mean, I think maybe there's a little more education required as to what a bad idea that offshore wind project is, because I don't see any merit in it whatsoever. I think solar and onshore wind and some other things you can make an argument for, but the offshore wind is just going to be a disaster, in my opinion.
Well, steel turbines in the ocean, what could go wrong, Steve?
I don't know. Hurricane. This is the first time anyone's tried to build one of these in a hurricane zone. So, I don't really want Virginia to be the first one to have a Class 5 hurricane hit a wind turbine field, but we might be. And and it's the biggest wind turbine field anybody's built in one fell swoop either. So, Oh, and by the way, did I mention that the way they've got it structured, 100% of the risk is on the ratepayers, not the company. Not the General Assembly, not the state, the ratepayers. If this thing goes south, we pay all of it.
Yep. And that's going to be the case in so many of these things. You're talking about the Virginia Clean Energy Act, Governor Northam's ambitious goal of 2050, zero carbon, and all of the rhetoric that you can throw from behind a podium at one sitting. And you mentioned that there was very little from the General Assembly to undo some of that. Do you think the governor needs to actually take the same lead he's taking on, setting down some legislators and saying, here's what I want, making it very clear publicly it's what he wants, the way he's going after the Supreme Court sponsored, need to have abortion law written?
I would hope that someone is plotting, legislation for the 23 session that will address some of these issues again and try to restore the State Corporation Commission role as a fair regulator that actually looks out for consumers. I have to say, I'm not aware of any such process, but it may be out there. His focus right now, I think, is going to be on this regional greenhouse gas initiative, RGGI, the carbon tax, and they're going to have a battle over that. They're going to try to repeal that with regulation. And I saw again today a story. I expect the other side will file a lawsuit, and it'll end up in court. Well,
I know that the other side, as it were, took great glee that they blocked his ability to do it, and they're going to keep doing it. And it is a carbon tax that just seeks to punish the poorest of us. So the people who can't afford it the most are going to pay the most in their increased electric fees and charges. Steve Hainer on with us from the Thomas Jefferson Institute for Public Policy, Bacon's Rebellion. What are you working on right now, Steve, in these dog days of summer? You have those solar cells out in the backyard just sucking in all this sunshine?
I don't think my HOA would let me. I live in one of those planned communities. They probably wouldn't allow me to put solar panels out. They'd complain about the view or something. But no, it's time to get back to work on something. So I've actually been goofing off and going to the beach and having a good summer. So, but I'll get back to writing a little bit more about some of these issues. And again, I'm waiting to see. I expect the State Corporation Commission will come down with their decision on the wind program, on the wind project, within the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
So that'll spark some stories. I'm doing a little research for Thomas Jefferson on a project that won't probably pop up until the fall.
Okay.
So I need to dig into some records on that. But I'm enjoying my summer.
Well, good. You deserve it, and we're going to give you plenty of work coming up into the next General Assembly, I'm sure. And keep on doing it. Again, it's thomasjeffersoninst.org. And Steve, thanks so much for joining us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.
It's great to talk to you again.
Coming up next on Freedom and Prosperity Radio, Senior Vice President of the Capital Research Center, Kristen Eastlick, on private money, those NGOs, and elections in Virginia.